A broken fence, a brand new stone path, and one arrogant move. Funny how a simple act of trespassing can unravel an entire empire. If you'd asked me a year ago, I'd have told you that HOAs were annoying but harmless. I'd never have guessed that a woman like Karen Blackwell could take a swing at my family's legacy and end up destroying everything she'd spent her life building. Yeah, this is the story of how an HOA president tried to carve a pathway through my property for her community good, and how I didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't even call the cops. Instead, I let them build their little gateway, quietly prepared my paperwork, and well, you'll see. See, my grandfather's old cabin sits on the last piece of land not owned by Lakeshore Estates, a neighborhood where the houses cost more than most folks make in a decade, and the HOA fees could pay my mortgage twice over. It's been in the Morrison family since 1892, two modest acres of pine trees, a creaky dock, and about 200 meters of the prettiest lakefront you've ever seen. While the neighbors lived behind high hedges and drove cars with names I can't pronounce, I was happy on that sagging porch drinking coffee and watching the sunrise, thinking of my grandfather and all the summers we spent fishing. All that peace vanished one October morning when Karen herself showed up in a white Tesla Blazer, heels clipboard, the whole "I run this place" vibe. She skipped knocking, strolled right up while I was fixing the dock, and launched into a speech straight out of a real estate seminar. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Karen Blackwell, president of the Lakeshore Estates HOA. We need to discuss your property situation. Situation like I was running a meth lab, not sanding down splinters." She started out fake friendly, offering me well above market value to buy me out. Said my old cabin didn't fit the vision for the neighborhood, that my fence blocked community access to the lake, that 200 families deserved their equal share of Pine Lake. She even tossed around the phrase eminent domain and claimed the law was on her side. I could tell she thought I'd cave, maybe even apologize for my existence. When I declined, her smile slipped and her real self peeked through. That night I heard a saw in the dark. By morning, a chunk of my fence was gone and a fancy crew was measuring a path right onto my land. I didn't get mad. Instead, I put up cameras, every angle, every motion. And then I waited. When Karen came back with a surveyor, she dropped a piece of paper, a printed email with Project Paradise in bold, detailing a $50 million development scheme. This wasn't about a walking path for the neighborhood. This was about turning Pine Lake into a private resort. My land, it turned out, was the only piece Karen couldn't get her hands on. Now here's where things get interesting. Instead of fighting, I let her finish the job. For days, I watched them lay expensive stone, set up a brass-gated entrance, and mount a sign, "Pine Lake Community Access Lakeshore Estates HOA." Karen's pride grew by the hour, but so did my collection of county deeds, water rights documents, and court records. Turns out, my grandfather left me more than just a cabin. He left a paper trail thicker than Karen's ego. The real twist. A call to Mrs. Hayes, my neighbor and retired court clerk who'd lived through more local history than any newspaper. She invited me over, handed me a box of yellow documents, and told me the truth. The Morrison family owned not just the land, but the lake itself. Full water rights backed up by an 1892 deed, a 2008 court judgment, and an ironclad clause that said, if anyone built on my land without permission, it became mine, no questions asked. Karen wasn't just trespassing. She was gift wrapping every dollar of her $1 million path to me. There was more. In the folder was evidence my grandfather had collected proof that after her son Michael's tragic drowning in 2008, Karen had faked police reports, threatened witnesses, including my grandfather, and covered up her own drunk driving that led to her son's death. She'd spent 15 years twisting the truth, building her empire on stolen money and secrets. The moment Karen's crew finished, I made my move. With the help of Mrs. Hayes and a cooperative judge, I filed an emergency injunction. In a single afternoon, the gate, the path, the lights, all of it was legally transferred to me. I live-streamed the whole thing, hanging a bright red private property. No trespassing sign right next to Karen's shiny new community access plaque. The neighborhood exploded, hundreds watching online HOA phones ringing off the hook, property values in free fall. You'd think that'd be enough, right? Nope. That night, Ben Carter, my old friend and one of the construction guys Karen had hired, came by with photos and inside info. Karen was planning a private marina, a spa, and a buyout of every house that stood in her way. She'd promised investors lake access that she didn't legally have, and she was about to lose everything. That's when Deputy Tom Walsh showed up, the same deputy who'd signed off on Karen's fake police reports 15 years earlier. Guilt written all over his face. He handed me copies of his original notes, witness statements, and a confession. Karen had crashed her car into the lake, killing her son, then used her law firm and city connections to cover it up. She threatened my grandfather, buried evidence, and got herself installed as HOA president to keep a lid on everything. Back at the cabin, I opened up the old man's hidden files. Inside, video evidence, financial records, and recordings that linked Karen to embezzlement, insurance fraud, and even more blackmail. She'd stolen millions from the HOA faked contracts and funded her resort dream with money siphoned from her neighbors. And worst of all, she'd claimed a $500,000 life insurance payout by lying about her son's death. The 4th of July rolled around and I knew what I had to do. I set up a giant LED screen by the lake, invited every single Lakeshore Estates resident to a Freedom Festival, and streamed it all live, every document, every video, every lie Karen had ever told. The reactions: shock, anger, heartbreak. You could hear a pin drop when the footage played Karen's voice rehearsing her alibi as her son's body floated beside her. When I announced the class action suit against her and handed everything to the FBI, the crowd lost it. Karen tried to storm the stage, calling me a liar, screaming that none of it was real, just as Deputy Walsh stepped up and put her in cuffs. Embezzlement, insurance fraud, vehicular manslaughter. She was finished. But I wasn't looking to be the king of the ashes. Inspired by my grandfather's last letter, not for revenge, but for justice. That lake belongs to everyone. I called a community vote. The entire neighborhood agreed, dissolve the HOA, convert the land into a public trust, open Pine Lake, for everyone. Within months, stolen money was recovered, HOA fees dropped from $800 to $50 a month, and my grandfather's cabin became a museum for local history and transparency. The park's entrance, Karen's stolen gate, standing right where she built it, only now welcoming families, not closing them out. And Karen last, I heard she's in federal prison serving 18 years and folding laundry for less than a quarter an hour. The ripple effects, news crews, national headlines, and more than a few angry HOA presidents calling their lawyers. Turns out, the most powerful weapon against corruption isn't a lawsuit or a fist, it's the truth, shared in the open, with neighbors who finally know the story behind the rules they're told to follow. So tell me, what would you have done? Ever dealt with a corrupt HOA, a boss with too much power, or a neighbor who thinks the law doesn't apply to them? Drop your stories in the comments. Let's get a real conversation going about justice, community, and what it means to fight back when the odds are stacked against you. If this tale gave you even half the satisfaction it gave me to live through, hit that like, subscribe, and maybe share the story with someone who needs a reminder that standing up for what's right can change everything.